good few hours left as well. All kinds of panels coming up, brought to you today by WSC Sports. The big news, if you've not heard, SoccerX is back and live in person. We're all absolutely delighted about it. The 11th and 12th of November in Miami. Back doing what we do best, 10 hours of content across 5 business streams, networking. The exhibitions are back, and most importantly, we can all chat together face to face. Will be absolutely fantastic. The 11th and 12th. For all the information to get involved, we hope you get involved with us. SoccerX website for passes and more for all the information. Okay, our next panel brought to you by our friends at WSC Sports around how rights holders can find new revenue streams around their archive content. Joining us today, Vadim Drozdowski, head of EMEA for WSC Sports, Andreina Montefusco, associate director at Infront Sports and Media, and our moderator, our presenter today, sports reporter, broadcaster at Broadcast Sport, Mr. Max Miller. Max, it's over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so today we've got Vadim and Andreina from WS Sports and Infront Sports. First of all, I guess, Vadim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at WSC Sports?
Sure. Thanks, Max. Great to be here. So my main role as of the last 6 months at WSC is basically growing and incubating the growth verticals of WSC. So basically everything that is built on our core technology but provides new revenue streams with existing clients and new industries. That's basically what I'm grooming and developing in the company.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vadim. And Andreina, if you can go ahead and do the same.
Yep. Thanks, Max. So I lead the digital account management team within Infront, and what the team really does is lead all of the digital projects for Infront clients. So what we end up doing is really working with the federations to develop their digital strategy and then really think through, okay, how do we use the digital channels to grow the sport and create additional revenue opportunities? So I work very, very closely with Vadim on multiple projects for Infront.
Okay, great. So 2 people obviously know a lot about trying to use your archive in new and innovative ways. And over the last few years, basically pre-COVID and even more so now, we've seen people turning to archive solutions, and it's a growing trend across sports. So I don't know who wants to go first, but maybe Vadim, if you can tell us about what you've been seeing across sport and how they've turned towards archive in the last 5 or so, or slightly less years.
Sure. I can start, and I think Andrea has a lot more to cover on this part from Infront. So basically, what we're seeing is as the move to digital becomes more and more robust, the rights holders start understanding that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of constrained by the linear distribution, that you can only fit so much, and then live is king and everything else is basically a nice to have type of content solution, perhaps for off season and stuff like that. But the digital distribution as it evolves opens a lot more opportunities for archive and live to live side by side and enhance each other in a way that really drives business results for rights holders. Slowly starting to realize that. So I think that started even before COVID. I think it did accelerate dramatically during COVID because the live aspect was not there and the gap was noticeable. So kind of as a lot of things really grew exponentially, so did the use of archival content. But it's here to stay with us, and I think rights holders are looking for more and more ways to put an ROI on their utilization of archive content, and really have a good enough reason to dig deep into the vast amount of content that they have in order to drive business results, make it significant portion of their business. We're here to help with it.
Yeah, and well, as someone from a rights holder, Andreina, I'm sure you have further to add on that and kind of how you've increasingly turned towards archive, not only as something to react to COVID with.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've been seeing a huge trend in people or in federations starting to look into that archive content to build whatever is going on as part of their life. So going in and telling more of that 360-degree story as to what's happening. And really now that they're sitting in all of this archive content, it's really a matter of thinking through, okay, well, how do we distribute this content? How can we monetize this content? So as Vadim was saying, it's really a matter of thinking through, okay, well, how do we get that ROI from all of this archive content that the federations are usually sitting on?
Yes, and well, you're sitting on all this essential content which you haven't been able to use. And WSC Sports, in a way, have turned to archive more recently, and originally being more for in-game solutions and highlights. And so what made you think, Vadim, that you wanted to turn to this large amount of content that was maybe not being used as well as it could be?
Yeah, so I think generally our mission is to basically to allow rights holders to make the best use of their rights, basically the content they own, in any way, shape, or form that we can allow to do that. Usually by unlocking opportunities with scale and speed through content creation automation. So the obvious, gateway into this world was speed and the live content associated with the speedy delivery of content. But scale is just as a strong part of automated content creation. And scale is, I think, is synonymous with archival content. There's a lot of it, and we really want to experiment and create the right compilations with this huge amount of content, and it is almost impossible to do without an automated way to sift through it, to understand it, and then to create like the right compilations, the right content out of it in a personalized way for platforms to fit for. So it was a natural choice for us to go that route. Again, accelerated by circumstances, but I think something that we had our close eye on throughout the last couple of years, just because of we believe it's a really strong opportunity and underutilized in a significant way right now.
Yes, and is that something you would agree with, Andrina? It was something you were kind of, as a rights holder, you were thinking about kind of automating, making it more of a wider scale than you had been beforehand?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, COVID accelerated this, but it was a lot of conversations that were happening beforehand, where it's, okay, well, how do we get all of this content? How do we get it in the right hands? How do we build that additional reach using all of this content? And then what tool can enable us to do this? So yeah, it's definitely a trend that we've been seeing. And then COVID was a hard push because obviously there was a big gap where no live games were happening. Therefore, federations had to result back into all of their archive content to continue to grow the sport.
Yeah, and while you're continuing to grow to it, obviously trying to get more out of your content and make it more evergreen and lasting for longer periods of time. And so I don't know which one of you wants to come in first on that and how this kind of solution can allow archive content to have a much longer life than it did beforehand.
I can start, and yeah, we had a lot of back and forth over it during the last year, really creating content and flash. So I think my general approach is that there is a vast difference between archival content and live content in terms of what we would call a high impact content. So with live, it's basically about the news around this content. So you really want to have an updating or catching up type of quality to the content. You want to be informative in a way that that kind of tells the story of what you've missed or what you just want to relive because you were so excited about when you saw it live. That's near live content. With archival content, I think what really makes a difference is the storytelling around it. So it's not the highlights like the grand highlights of the game that happened 5 years ago because that might appeal to a very small subset of the fan base. Generally speaking, what would we would call it evergreen content, would probably fall into the category of, creating career highlights, creating narratives of, great rivalries, that stood the test of time. Teams that, had a decline and then recovery, stuff that you can really kind of tell a robust story around. And that is really usually hard to do if you don't have, the underlying infrastructure of, understanding where those building blocks of that story will come into play, and have, the right automation around creating those compilations. So I think that's mainly where we identified the gap. We understood that that's probably what's going to work best, and we understood there's a really strong, like a really high effort in delivering this type of content. So I think the natural step was, automation would probably unlock value here.
Yes, and I guess Andreina there, I guess Vadim gave us a lot of very good areas where archive content can come into use, both evergreen and more in a kind of near live situation. In front, you works with quite a few Italian football clubs and other rights holders. And so what kind of use cases have you been seeing more recently, and how they've changed over the last couple of years?
Yep. So I think definitely over time, we've seen obviously broadcasters or OTT solutions use a lot of this content, but I think a big push has been documentary style films or production companies wanting to, again, as Vadim said, tell this story using all of this content. So be that Amazon, Netflix, etc., going in and taking all of the archive content to tell the story of a player or of a team. The other big push for this content is also on the clubs or the federation's social channels and their owned and operated channels, be that their website or their YouTube pages or their Facebook pages, etc. And then more and more now we're seeing a trend again of, okay, well, how do we continue to capitalize that, and how do we create additional digital opportunities with these? So be that what we just did with WSC and the content partnership that we had with them, that's been another use case for this content as well.
Yes, that was exactly what I was about to get onto, to be honest. So thank you for that. The two of you have been working together on a project to do with those same Italian football clubs recently. And so I guess maybe Andreina, you can say first what you kind of went to WSC asking for in that situation.
Yep. So I think here, as I said before, there was a lot of archive content just sitting there. And what we wanted to do was just start to create a bigger reach for all of that content. As Vadim was saying, just help contextualize and help develop those different storylines for it. And we needed a tool to do it because we had obviously all of the content, but we didn't have a way to provide this content over to the different content creators. So I think there is where we partnered with WSC quite well in helping develop the tool and then providing all of the content creators with all of this content. So Vadim, I don't know if you want to give a little bit more explanation as to the tool itself.
Yeah, sure. I can touch on the specific approach we took, and basically our thought process that led us towards the thing will be insightful. So basically, I think when we started talking, us and Infront, about the opportunity around the Italian clubs content, we started thinking through, okay, there's as we understand, there's a lot of really great content here. There's like decades of amazing classic football, but it's as all of archival content, it's underutilized, and we also understood that we need to create a clear and kind of a very efficient ROI here. We need to understand where this content will go, how it will be monetized, how it will get distributed, kind of close the loop, because that was basically the conditions we were facing. We need to, to do something with that content, unless, otherwise it's not really worth, taking the trouble of, kind of, working through it. So we needed to have a business model to basically to integrate with the content creation capabilities. So we kind of put our thinking hats on, and we stumble upon this reality, the reality that we all live in, and we're not really aware of. It's basically just something we take for granted. That the reality is that, in my opinion, the content, real IP content on social has a really significant problem in terms of a vicious cycle. I'll explain what I mean. The current situation is that most content on social channels, the most content that is not being utilized by rights holders, but being uploaded by third parties, as we all know, is in the gray area. It's not legitimate content that's been uploaded on social channels. Sometimes, creators get it from third parties or just, acquire it somehow and upload it. And then it creates a vicious cycle of, how fast can I upload illegal content before I get caught? And, my revenues get claimed or my video gets taken down. And the whole incentive of all of these creators out there is just to get the content, like the worst quality content out there as fast as possible in order to make a quick buck before they get caught. And that creates a really, really negative reinforcing loop of bad content proliferating. The chance really not brand safe, really not promoting the right attributes of the rights holder, not generating any revenue at the end of the day because it's being cut as soon as it's uploaded. So at the end of the day, really, really, really negative outcomes to all parties involved in this ecosystem. And we said like it doesn't have to be that way. Like why is it that way? I think that the main issues is there is a brand safety issue that the rights holders really are concerned with their rights. And second of all, they want to have a mechanism of distributing their content. If they were to work with the content creators, they will need to have some sort of kind of infrastructure around it to facilitate that relationship, facilitate that content exchange, and then obviously the revenue exchange that will be associated with that partnership. And all of that did not exist. And as I said, rights holders have a lot of content, but sometimes they lack the capability to go because they need to analyze. Like they don't have the capability to make that content accessible to third party. They don't think of the business model that would be associated with it. So once the capability is there, the business model became obvious. Why not just work with creators, provide them high quality content and the ability to create those really strong, meaningful compilations in an instant manner, and then partner with them, make them co-op them, make them part of your organization, make them your editors, make them your distribution network, and basically by that kind of creating a whole new revenue stream that did not exist, and really enlarging the pie for all the stakeholders involved, and really create a self-reinforcing positive cycle here. That was the main approach. Apologies for the prolonged explanation. I think it's just, it was like kind of an aha moment, kind of like, why are we not doing this? That was kind of the basic logic behind it. That if we were to do that and we were to prove the feasibility of it, the growth would be exponential. And I think we can touch on it later, what the outcomes were. But that was the thought process. Yes,
and well, it all sounds very good for everyone involved, essentially, from what you were saying there. But in the past, I think rights holders have been a bit worried about letting their content go to too many areas, usually sticking to kind of traditional broadcasters and so on. And so in this case, Andrea, why were you kind of more willing to let your content go to more creators?
And I think here the thing is we had a bit of a controlled distribution where we can again monetize, but together with WSC, we had a rigorous selection process of choosing these content creators. We were picking people who obviously didn't go against the club or the players themselves. We were making sure that these content creators had the highest quality content, and we were able to provide them also with guidelines of what they could and couldn't do. So I think all of that really helped us have this a bit more of a controlled distribution, which alleviated a lot of that pain that you can feel once that content gets out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that gave a bit more control over what was happening, I guess. And so for you with Vadim, sorry, for you, Vadim, what were the outcomes with it? What kind of things did you see the creators doing which gave extra value to the content and so on?
Right. So I think what we immediately saw is each creator had its own approach to which content they wanted to create. We had some creators that were more focused on, the Italian audience, and they were telling, like great rivalry stories, between different clubs because they knew that would be the most specialty. Some were more, directed at a wider international audience. They would tell about, like, have great success stories or even specific players that, rose to the top. So I think what we really saw is tremendous diversity in, like, the stories that were being told with the same type of content. The same, I think, game footage played a role in various different compilations that overall told a completely different story. In addition, obviously, the styles were really different. Some would use their own commentary. They would, provide, explanations of what they think, where they think the player went well, and where they made the wrong decision in the career, and so on. Some would just, explain tactically how the players are, So we've all seen these videos, but now, kind of thinking through it in a structured way to say, wow, my content can be doing so much more than it is doing right now, just by kind of unlocking a simple kind of channel that says, this is my content. If I have the right guardrails in place, I will let you use it. And if there is a partnership model in place, I will obviously get a return for it. And I think that made all the sense in the world because, like, once we saw this abundance of content coming in, it was kind of what, like, it's obvious it's not possible to replicate this by any other means. So we have to keep doing this. This is probably the future. We just need to facilitate it, prove it, explain it to the rights holders, and I think that kind of became a really a kind of I would say cathartic moment for me, at least, like a few months into the partnership when I saw it actually was, like, skyrocketing. I'll tell you a little bit about the numbers. So we saw 50% month-over-month increase in daily viewership. So basically, like, what's good about social networks is that they have algorithms, and the algorithms learn pretty fast what kind of content each content creator has, and the audience is there. They just need to be reliable enough in creating the right content, and then YouTube would just recommend this content to the right target audience. You just need to consistently keep creating. And what we saw was a really strong takeoff after the third month in viewership across all of our channels. When everybody found their own style and started creating these videos, on a regular basis, and I think we got to a point where we were at, a rate of tens of millions of views monthly. I think around a million daily viewers and so on. And it really showed up. And as Andrea said, it was very, very controlled. We only did it to kind of to showcase the potential of what it could become. So we're really, really positively impressed with the sheer scale of where this could go. And yeah, like for me, it was very gratifying.
Yeah, and even at that kind of smaller, more controlled scale, you seem to reach a lot more people, basically, and kind of a much wider audience than you may have done otherwise. Is that one of the main successes were for you as a rights holder, Andreina? And were there any other aspects as well which you were looking at as something which you can build on for the future?
So definitely, I think at the end of the day, what we wanted to do obviously was grow the sport. And here we were reaching a new untapped audience I think the other thing is the stories that these content creators were telling were a bit in a genuine and a different voice. And that's something that we, or from a rights holder's perspective, it's good to look at as well as to, okay, well, if you're taking this story and giving it to someone else, how can they tell the same story in a different way? So the exposure was definitely something that was a huge success for us. And then obviously all of the revenues tied to this as well. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, the return on the investment, both from an exposure and from a budget perspective, we're definitely there.
It's also something when you're speaking about the revenue and how, well, gaining most of that, I would assume, from advertising and so on. Is it something where you think further innovation to do with this can come from that area in terms of how revenue is brought in from it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a place where a lot more we're going to see this trend going on, where not only are we going to be able to do programmatic advertising on all of this content, but also potentially sell this to our sponsors as well as digital packages. So yes, definitely.
Okay, great. Is that something, Vadim, as well at WSC, you see selling it as a package, I guess, there for the rights holders, but is there something else in the future you think specifically in this kind of use case that you could build on from the results that you got?
Yeah, sure. So our approach is that we always want to engage with clients in the most frictionless way possible. And a business model like this, which we are basically creating new revenue, which we can all share, is much less friction heavy than having the rights holder pay for something in advance, hoping they can then generate their own ROI on it. So I think this kind of was a light bulb moment saying, hey, this is much more scalable. Now we want to unlock something new. We could, roll it out as basically a partnership model that would be much more easily adoptable. In addition, what we see is, like we always say that it's not only about revenue, it's about, the distribution network. You're really getting distribution network that you did not have before to audiences. I think I'm going to touch on it a little bit. And in that way, you can actually promote, the rights holder can promote their brand, can promote their digital properties, can promote their own and operated content, can promote their own sponsors or, commercial partnerships. So basically, this becomes a vehicle that is multifaceted, where you can actually meet the audience that wants to see your content and engage with them in various commercial models. So all in all, I think it's very promising in terms of where this could go commercially. I think also in terms of the content aspect, I think we have a lot more to figure out. Like, and the creators will start surprising us in new and exciting ways what they can all produce with the same raw material.
Yes, and is it something where obviously you're reaching the same audiences that you were before, most likely, but at the same time, are you kind of finding it better to reach those audiences that are a bit harder to get to? So the younger audiences and people who aren't necessarily going to watch through linear and so on. I guess, Andrea, maybe you can go ahead first.
Yes. So yes, we're reaching a very different audience, I think. Not only, I think from a federation standpoint, obviously there's a lot that they reach through their own and operated channels or their social media accounts, but through the content creators themselves, you're also tapping into their audience themselves. So I think that's one of the reasons why that selection process that I was talking to at the beginning is so important, because at the end, you want to partner with a content creator who can have an outreach to an audience that's different than the audience that you can tap into. So yeah.
Yeah, and do you agree, Vadim? Did you find, I mean, obviously the younger audiences would be the obvious one, but is there any other kind of groups that you found where you're able to kind of tap into and reach out to?
Yeah, so I would say younger audience definitely, because there are a lot of people who are cord nevers now. We know it from every study that's been published. More and more people have never had connection to cable or pay TV subscription. and did not obviously did not have any outlet to watch these classic matches, and they would not watch it if they were like just basic highlights. But if you package them in a TikTok reel and create a 6 second compilation out of it, I can bet they would watch it, and they would know the heritage behind your brand or your league. They will be much more connected to the stories. They will be able to to then connect more to what's happening live in your property. So I think it is a way to kind of having the cake and eat it in some sort way, because you do relate to your classic fans, the ones that really yearn to see that content, yearn for those stories, they live through that moment. But it's also a way to kind of engage with those younger audience, saying, "Hey, we will meet you on your terms. We'll get that content delivered the way you want to engage with it." But in that sense, we kind of acquire you as new fans into our kind of ever expanding fan club. I think the young and old here work kind of in a perfect balance.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you that much wider pie, which I think you were saying again earlier. And so it's something at the moment which you're using mainly for kind of archive evergreen content, generally this partnership at the moment. Is it something where in the future you could see it moving into other areas, such as the more kind of near live highlights and areas like that? Vadi?
So we already see rights holders dabbling with creators, with live content. Streamers, going on Twitch and broadcasting, having watch parties and all of that. That's kind of a manifestation of rights holders understanding there is a wider distribution here, audiences I can get to, audience whose voices I don't understand, and I would need a mediator to get to. So I think it is an evolution. Live content is trickier in a sense, that the ROI needs to be that much higher, or doesn't have to be like direct revenue ROI, but it has to be some sort of long-term ROI in terms of what the rights holder can do with this distribution that it cannot do in other means. But in a general sense, I just think that the infrastructure that we build here, once it's up and running and scaled, it will be kind of very, very inefficient not to use it for all different types of content distribution solutions, just because the marginal cost, as everything on the internet, will be very, very close to zero, and impact will probably be very, very significant the closer you go to live. So yeah, the short answer is it's probably going to happen. It will just get a little more time to adjust to it from rights perspectives and from rights holders comfortable being able to deal with it comfortably.
Yeah, Angelina, do you agree? Do you think are you kind of in front? Are you close to kind of getting to that point where you're much more comfortable with giving out the content and maybe moving into things such as the near live highlights or other areas?
Yes, definitely. I think not only are we looking into that, but also really tailoring, okay, well, what content is relevant where and in what platform as well. I think platforms play a heavy role in this as well. So it's also thinking through, okay, well, how do we, again, to what Vadim was saying at the beginning, how do we tell that story in a genuine way? But what channels do we use to tell that story? And back to the conversation that we were just having before around the targets, like how do we use each channel to reach different targets, and how do we tailor that story specifically to that?
Yeah, and well, in this kind of use case, where it was mostly targeted towards YouTube, as I understand. And so which kind of platforms do you think would be particularly useful going forward? Would you be looking more towards Instagram and Facebook, or other platforms that could be used? Angelina?
I think, yes, definitely all social media platforms. So TikTok, I think Vadim gave an example before. I think that's it's one of the hot social media platforms. And the more we know about it, the more we know, okay, the younger audience is really engaged there, but how do we tell that story within that TikTok ambiance or that TikTok story mode. I think Instagram stories also plays a very important role. Instagram itself. So yeah.
Yeah, and do you agree? Obviously, you mentioned TikTok before, and we've seen a lot of TikTok use at the Olympics very recently by a lot of the athletes. So, Vadim, do you think that maybe that's one of a better platform to be used for this kind of creator-led content?
Yeah, no, I do believe that YouTube has the strongest distribution, so it was easiest to start there. It was like scalable, but definitely this needs to go everywhere social is, and viral, viral is possible basically. So I think at the end of the day, what I like about this approach that you don't have to be an expert in all these platforms. You just have to find the right distribution network, and basically can become agnostic to which social networks are on your distribution network, as long as you have the right people who are doing the right content that is kind of content experts in their own domain. So yeah, definitely Snap, TikTok will be strong. Snap has really made a lot of strides towards facilitating a new kind of outlet for sports fans with Snap shows now, and there's a lot of adoption there in the last few months. So basically, I think there's kind of a convergence with social channels really want that content now in order to drive future adoption and drive the new wave of fans to engage with this content. And rights holders are looking for better ways to utilize these platforms. So I think it's just a matter of position ourselves in the right way and having the right discussion. It's good that we got there. I think it's been a while, but I think we're at the point of it becoming instrumental to distribute on multiple channels in a scaled way, not only on your own operation.
Yes, and the platform is one thing, and you can put it on as many as you want, but then a very important other part will be the sport itself. And so obviously you've started off with football, and there are plenty of creators around football, and it's incredibly popular pretty much everywhere. So Andrea, as in front, obviously you have many other sports on your roster, and so do you see this being translatable to other sports? And if in that case, what does a sport need in terms of its following for it to be particularly useful in this case?
Yeah. So yes, it's definitely transferable. I think one of the things, and Vadim and I had long conversations about this as well, is we need to do this on sports or on federations that have that are in tier 1, tier 2, because there needs to be that appetite that exists there in order for this to work. If you go for a smaller, super niche sport, I think it's going to be much harder. While if we're talking football or basketball, etc., I think it'll be a lot easier to get that story told.
Yeah. I would add to that, I agree completely. I would add to that the strength and the opportunity that the social channels allow you is to basically to uncover all of those hidden fans who don't engage with your content, engage with third-party content, and would replace Serie A with Bundesliga just because they just want to see high-quality content. But that is like a wide target audience. Once you have a more niche type of sport or a more niche league, I think the league knows a lot better how to find these audiences, and the unlocking of additional potential using social is like third party social would be smaller because those are leagues that are sought out, right? That are leagues, I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm not going to give any specific examples, but you know what we're talking about when we say it's basically the content is there, and whoever wants it, kind of pulls it. It's not the content that you push and get the results that you probably, that would transform your unit economics. So, I think that's the distinction. The distinction is whether you have untapped potential in your fan base around the globe, and the ones that you obviously cannot get to just with your own social channel.
Yeah, and it's something which actually links to a question from the audience that we've just got in from Claudio, who is there something particularly recently that you've been looking at and seeing other leagues you think similar? Or for example, the example Claudio gives is for the NBA allowing creators to kind of do more of what they wish with the content in a similar fashion. And do you think that's showing promise for the area? And is it something which shows that the whole industry is moving towards that more freedom for its content? If maybe Vadim, you can go first.
I'll take it, and Andrea can chime in. I think that generally speaking, we're at the moment in time where every second word is creator economy, and everybody's trying to say they have something to do with creator economy. I think in that sense, I don't want to just use buzzwords, but I do think that there is a strong realization that creators and basically content mediators, I would say, ones that bring their own personal approach to something that perhaps has an IP, but that additional layer of editing and personalization is a value on its own, and it creates value for the entire chain, for the entire rights holder value chain. I think that realization is becoming more and more obvious. As always, there will be early adopters, there will be more classic rights holders that will take their time. But I think generally speaking, the direction is that it's probably going to show in the bottom line very fast the forward thinking organizations that will know how to harness this new power of curating professionals and have them really become a strong value driver for the business one by one. So we'll probably have that call in a couple of years and see which ones did it right and which didn't.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I guess Andrea, moving on from that, do you agree? Is that kind of what you think as a rights holder who was one of those kind of early adopters, I guess, or is currently? What do you see from other parts of the industry, and what do you think about what they're doing in a similar area?
Yeah, I think definitely the content creators telling this curated story is definitely, it's becoming more and more important now. Obviously, social channels facilitated a lot of this, but I also think that this doesn't come at the cost of not continuing to create, or not for the federations not to continue to create the stories on their own social channels. I think that they need to live in conjunction. But yes, we will see content creators continue to evolve and continue to peak, and as new social media platforms grow, there will continue to be that outlet to tell the story. But let's not, like, that doesn't make us forget that the federations themselves need to use their own and operated channels to continue to grow their sport as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to choosing those kind of creators and deciding, obviously this time it was quite controlled. You speak about how in the future maybe you can allow it go to more people than it did in this case. But when it first came to deciding who got to use that content, which obviously gives quite a lot of help to that person creating the content. So how did you make the decision with who gets it and who doesn't, essentially? Andrea, I guess you can go first.
Yeah, I think here what we did was a rigorous analysis on looking at these content creators, what content have they posted before, making sure that they never spoke offensively about a club or a player, making sure that they have obviously large social followings, checking as well their audience, and really thinking through, okay, is there an innate tie with the federation themselves, or is it a bit too stretched and maybe that's not the right content creator for us, and let's see who's next.
Is that the same with you, Vadim? Obviously you were a bit closer to the creators, being the kind of in the middle of the two groups.
Yeah, I think Andrea said it perfectly. I think we wanted a unique voice. We wanted a unique voice for the creators to test if we had the best chance to do it in a small group. We wanted each of them to really bring their own unique kind of approach to the content creation, and we wanted them to be engaged with the content. We wanted to be avid fans, not just ones that would say, hey, yeah, I can do this content, I can do that content. They would be like I wanted them to say, I want this content. I love it. Like I watch it rigorously, and I will be the end user of this product myself. So
Yeah.
these are the ones we were searching for first and foremost, along with everything that Andrea said.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, well, hopefully everyone's got a good picture of how that use case went and how we're going towards using our archive content in a lot better way, in a way that can be monetized more easily and so on. And I can hand back to the studio now. Thank you both.